I've had a lot of people asking about how my coaching process works from early stage ACL rehab all the way through to a full return to sport. So, in today's video, what I'm going to do is just walk you through exactly what those steps are, all the way from the application process all the way through to full return to sport. So, it begins with a very simple application form. All you need to do is just let me know what your goals are with your rehab, any particular challenges you've been facing, and just to get a bit of better sense of where you're at with your rehab and how you think I can help you. What you do then is just book a time that's convenient for you, and we'll do a virtual call. And on that consultation call, we're going to discuss your goals, find out more about any particular obstacles you're facing with your rehab, and map out a plan to get you back to sport. Now, if on this call, we both think it's a good mutual fit, and I think you'd be a really, really good client to work with, and I think you'd have a lot of success on the program, I'll offer you a place on the program, and we'll talk through the onboarding process. Now, onboarding is super, super simple. You'll get access to the community straight away, where you'll have an opportunity to work through a very simple checklist, get access to our training app, Train Heroic, and begin to work through your assessments. Now, in the assessments, this is where we're going to get an in-depth understanding of your current physical capabilities with a screening process that lets me understand where you're at with your strength scores, mobility scores, and also how you're currently moving. Now, once that's been completed, we will complete our Kickstart call. And the Kickstart call is where I will talk you through the assessments, give you a real clear breakdown of what it is that has been highlighted in that, where you're particularly strong, what particular areas you need to focus on, and just get really laser focused on what it is that you need to focus on for your ACL rehab, because everyone's got different needs, they've got different capabilities, and that's going to help to individualize this process for you. Now, once we've done the assessments, we've completed the Kickstart call, we've spoken about the scores, and your program has been built, we're focused then on phase one. Now, phase one of ACL rehab is where we look to achieve full knee extension and quad activation. And this is the first 6 weeks, typically, sometimes longer. But as a ballpark, the first 6 weeks is really heavily focused around achieving full mobility, full quad activation, so that we can then move on to the next phase. Now, how that looks is delivered via training app, Train Heroic. So you can very, very simply and intuitively do it on your own terms, in your own time, times that work for you throughout the day, with simple reminders to do daily tasks, such as make sure you've checked your pain scores, any kind of inflammation scores that might be relevant, and to log and track that on a day-to-day basis. At the end of the 6 weeks, then once we've achieved that and once we've passed the criteria, we move to phase two. Now, phase two is much more around developing single leg strength and preparing for a return to run. Now, the criteria for a return to run include things like single leg strength, calf strength, hamstring strength, lateral trunk capabilities, and a number of other scores as well. Now, if you pass all of those criteria in those first 12 weeks, so this is moving you from week 6 to week 12, then we'll basically have the green light to move forwards and introduce running again, which is a really significant milestone, obviously. So we've worked through that early stage phase one, we've worked through early stage phase two, we've worked through a series of progressive single leg strength exercises, trunk capability scoring, hamstring capacity, calf capacity. You've achieved all those scores and got a green light for all of them. We can introduce running. Typically, this is around the 12-week mark, but again, this can be longer, it can be shorter. It just depends on you individually. If again you've passed those phase two assessments, we can introduce running, which is a really significant moment, and a lot of people get super excited and can sometimes get carried away with running. It's important to just be mindful of this progressive loading pattern with an introduction of running. So that's done progressively week to week, of increasing volume at a progressive pace and not suddenly introducing lots and lots of volume. The aim here is to introduce running to prepare for a return to sport. Ultimately, this is what we're trying to do in this phase three. So it's around a 14-week period. Again, can be shorter, can be longer. And at the end of phase three, there are a series of targets, again, which you've got to meet, which are more advanced than phase two. These include things like higher levels of strength. We're looking at pushing around a 1.8 to 2 times body weight strength score, higher levels of capacity, reduced asymmetry, which is the difference between left and right. Now we're looking at around a 5% difference, not a 15% difference in phase two. So we're getting very, very specific now on what we're looking for. What we can also do in phase three is begin to introduce plyometrics, jumping, hopping, bounding, that kind of thing, progressively over the weeks. So by the end of phase three, you should, and if you have achieved all these scores, have really, really high levels of single leg strength, very, very minimal difference between the two legs, within 5% of each other. Really good capacity scores, by which I mean endurance capability of the muscle groups, and also the ability to jump and land and stick and hop on a single leg with control, without massive asymmetry on both legs. And again, that's a 5% difference. If you pass all of those scores, we can move to phase 4, and that's the exciting bit. This is when we're looking to actually prepare you for a return to sport now. And this is the 6 to 9 month mark. So between month 6 and month 9, this is where we are essentially gearing you up for that return to sport. In order to give you the green light to go back to sport, we use a protocol that requires a score of 95 out of 100, and it covers off not just physical scores, but also psychological readiness scores as well, using a number of different questionnaires that gather objective data about how psychologically ready you feel for this. Now, the assessments are not a one and done process. They can be done a number of times, and the scores will obviously increase over time until you're at a point where you've achieved that 95% threshold. But just to take it back a step, what this looks like in this 14-week block is now an introduction to multi-directional high-speed sprinting, multi-directional plyometrics, full introduction to training, so you can actually do the sport itself at a low level and gradually begin to include more and more progressive sport. And at the end of this, you have to pass that full assessment process. The assessments themselves have got similarities to phase 4, but we're also looking to include those psychological readiness scores, and we're looking to have slightly higher levels of single leg power scores and strength scores than phase 3. And this in-person assessment, then when we work through a really comprehensive in-person assessment, is then going to prepare you for that full return to sport. So if at the end of phase 4 and you've done your assessments, you've passed them, you've got a score of 95 plus, you have passed the single leg strength scores, single leg power scores, single leg control scores, and then things like calf capacity, hamstring capacity, core capacity, and you're psychologically ready, you've passed all the questionnaires, you feel really ready to go, you're confident, you're eager, you're ready and willing to go back to sport, you can have a full introduction back to your sport again, which is obviously a significant milestone, and a massively important sort of milestone to achieve. Now, once you've gone back, there's still a little bit of work left to do, because you can't just stop everything at this stage. You've got to make sure that you're doing ongoing continuation training to prevent the risk of re-injury again. We know that if you had an ACL, the risk of re-injury is significantly higher. So making sure that you're doing things to avoid injury again is massively important. And there's a 3-month block here, which is where we'll work through injury prevention work to make sure you can go back to sport safely. And that 12-week period is a continuation of a lot of the work that you've done, but also an inclusion of things like plyometrics, strength work, and just making sure continuing to progress some of those strength scores. So you're not just preparing all the way back to sport and then just stopping. It's important that you do continue on with lots of progressive strength and power work to, again, just to continue to prevent injury. And that's our kind of insurance policy, if you like, for you, that even though you've passed the assessment period, there's still a couple of weeks beyond that where we're going to continue to do some really high quality work, so that even though you're back to sport, you're safeguarding your body, you're making sure you're fully ready, and we can ensure a really safe introduction to sport beyond that. That then takes you through to that full 9-month to 12-month mark. You're back, you're playing sport, you've passed all the assessments, you've gone through our whole protocol, you've done the injury prevention work, and you are good to go, as long as you have a clear idea of what it is that you should be continuing to do for the long term, and you know exactly what you should be doing. And that's a big part of what we do. We'll teach you exactly what you should be doing on a week-to-week basis from now on, just to make sure that you're keeping yourself safe, injury-free, and can enjoy a lifelong sporting commitment.